So I can't see what time it is anymore.
It's
It's just 12 noon. We
about,
should give it a couple minutes.
yeah.
eh? Kyla's with us. Great. Hi, Kyla.
Hello.
So I think we'll give it just a few minutes in case there are a couple more that want to join us and are running a little bit late. I don't want too much time to elapse, but a little bit just in case.
no snow in New York today, Brad?
No, we haven't had for about a month, and that
Yeah.
was the only snow we got all winter.
Oh, wow.
Really?
Sorry.
It was a very warm, unusual winter. So,
Mhm.
Yeah. Our friends in Kentucky said the same thing about their area, just very warm compared to normal. Yeah.
Hi, Kyla, can you hear me? Oh, she's muted.
I can. Hi.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Yourself?
Oh, good. Yeah. Good to
Just
have
a-
another urban forestry professional here.
Sure. Yeah. We're just sitting here in the middle of a big storm warning, winter storm warning. Lucky
Yeah,
us.
I'd heard that.
Although I don't know, it's not bad right now. I mean, I'm not saying it's nice out, but it's
But
not
it's not as-
Stormageddon.
Yeah, it's not as bad as they were saying, although
No.
there's still time, I guess.
For sure.
Okay, I think maybe we'll get started, and Craig will probably be able to let people in if they're coming a little bit late. My name is Madeline Robinson, and I'm co-chair for the Knox Green team, and it's we organized this presentation. Very excited to have Brad join us. Before we begin, I just want to acknowledge that we are on Treaty 2 land here in Brandon, and that is the traditional lands of the Cree, the Oji-Cree, the Anishinaabe, the Dakota, the Dene, and it's the heart of the Métis Nation. So these peoples have cared for this land for thousands of years, and their histories, languages, and cultures continue to influence our community. Brad, were you able to find acknowledgement for your area?
Yeah, give me a second to not give
Okay.
away all my slides here. Yes, and I'm in Westchester County, New York, which is the traditional territory of the Lenape tribe. And I acknowledge that they've been here for thousands of years as well, and taking care of things. So.
Excellent. So I'm just gonna introduce you, Brad. Most everybody here probably already knows you in one form or another, but we do know that you are a certified arborist and a tree expert. And Brad is going to talk to us about why we shouldn't plant trees just because it makes us feel good. So Brad is a graduate of Brandon University with many years of experience in urban forests here in Brandon, as well as Edmonton, and now, of course, in New York. So he's going to share some of his thoughts and experiences about urban green programs and tree planting in particular. And we will have an opportunity after Brad's presentation to ask questions. So I'm going to ask you to hold on to your questions until after the presentation. And just a quick thanks, Brad, for agreeing to do this. And I think I'll let you take it from here.
All right. Thank you very much, Madeline. And I was excited to do this and was thinking about it. And as you may have all realized, the title is a bit of a poking fun at us as green people, that sometimes we take a lot for we take a lot for granted that other people feel the same way as we do about trees, that oh, they make you feel good and that's why we should plant them. So I wanted to sort of poke fun at that, because many times when I was in Brandon and in other municipal environments, I would have to go before council and plead the case for green assets and the value of them. And you're always coming up against some sort of a sewer pumping plant or a road diversion or some other dollars and cents thing that sort of takes the wheels off of your feel-good cart. So I just sort of switched, as many other urban foresters did, out of the feel-good forestry field and into the dollars and cents of it. But don't be alarmed, because we will come back around at the end, and with the good news that they have sort of begun to quantify the feel-good effects of it, which are another benefit of this. So I wanted to put the title out there to get people to scratch their heads and really think about it, because ultimately, in Manitoba especially, trees make the urban environment worth living in. And way back when, I think it was the International Year of Youth or something like this, there was a UN funded in green thing that went on in the Envirothon. And I worked with Dave Barnes, and we just sort of cobbled together a program to plant trees around the Park Community Center and in that neighborhood. And back then there wasn't a lot of guidelines or anything. So we just sort of figured, well, the way you do things in Brandon, you just go out and do it and see what happens. So we learned a lot, and some of the trees survived. We had a program where people were donating unwanted trees, and we were relocating them with a tree spade and all these things that you might get stuck in red tape with now, but a lot of them survived. And when you see the spruce trees, there's an amber cherry that's grown way too big next to the Park Community Center there. Those were all part of the urban forestry initiative that we started before we even knew what that was. We also tried to plant small caliper trees on some of the avenues, which didn't work out too well. We found out that if people planted the small ones, you had to go on the side streets because there was a lot less traffic there. So these sorts of things we just figured out on our own. Also, the fact that once you plant them, you have to take care of them. And we ended up using our the Park Community Center Zamboni tank to haul around water and keep these things growing through the course of the summer. But nowadays, some of those trees are 8 and 10 inch ash trees and some maples and things like that wouldn't have been there because at that time we were just dealing in that neighborhood with a whole bunch of pollarded Manitoba maples that were on their last legs. So we just sort of took the grant money, had some students from Neelan High School come out and plant it, and it turned out to be a real learning experience. And at that time I was working on the Dutch elm disease program. And there wasn't a lot of tree planting going on in the communities, but I'm sure that might have ratcheted up a little bit. So without any further ado, I'll get into some of the slides. I know most of us, I'm sure if anybody has any questions, put up your hand or make a comment, I can stop. It's supposed to be interactive. I'm not going to read a whole bunch of PowerPoint slides. We can all do that. But I did some screen snaps of things that I've worked with, and I'll discuss those. So without any further ado, let's talk about the value of urban trees in our environment, as well as talk about why we shouldn't just plant trees because they make people feel good. So I got a couple of pictures. One that I snapped as I came into Winnipeg over top of Portage Avenue. You can see my plane's actually the shadow in the background there. And Winnipeg has a pretty decent canopy. I don't know the statistics as far as canopy cover. That's something that we're going to get into as we go through here. But even in the winter time, our Manitoba's tree, the white spruce, is doing its duty to keep people from blowing away in the wind or freezing to death. So How do I advance? Okay, so don't plant trees to make you feel good. I think it's important to note that these days, more and more municipalities are aware that trees are an actual part of the city infrastructure. And when I was working in the city of Edmonton, I was kind of surprised to learn, but did learn quite quickly that there's a whole process to go and take a tree and put it into the city inventory. Developers plant them; they have to be normalized and brought in as a part of the infrastructure. And that's the key to this, is that as part of most cities' urban forestry management plans, these things are all inventoried. They're all categorized. Any defects are noted, species, all these things can be put into an inventory, because when you think about it, it's a tremendous asset to the city. People don't really realize how much that is. It's always trees don't pay taxes, and well, actually they do. They pay a lot of taxes, and they help you from paying a lot of taxes. They increase in value every year. It's one of the few infrastructure pieces that does that. Not only the actual value of the tree on a replacement basis, which is one thing, but the contributions that it gives as far as reducing stormwater runoff, environmental pollutants, noise, carbon sequestration. All of these things are a tremendous benefit to a city. So there is an online thing from arborday.org called the National Tree Benefit Calculator. And just to give you an idea, it's an American site, but I didn't even try to use Canadian postal codes. I just used one from Dunseith. I mean, the values are going to be somewhat similar. The climate is similar and the species are similar. So, you know, to be fully transparent, I think trees are great. You know, we all know that, or we wouldn't be here today. But how do you represent this to a municipal environment, like I said before, where you're competing with the southwestern Manitoba sewage station that's going to take this much money and move this much sewage and do this and that. You really kind of have to show people the money, and a lot of people are shocked. Government councillors and mayors, and some of them know, but some of them haven't really heard the good word about trees. Okay, so looking at this slide, I took green ash. I know green ash is kind of in the crosshairs right now because of emerald ash borer. But let's be realistic. We planted thousands and thousands of them over the years as elms were being replaced. So if you can see, there's a little pie chart in the corner, and I'll zoom in on that in a bit. But the biggest portion of that pie chart is its effect on real estate values, because people really like to live in treed environments. Nobody wants to live out in the bald prairies. In fact, the first thing most settlers did was build a shelter belt so that they could not see the tumbleweeds blowing by. And so they say it's a 10 to 15% impact on neighborhood values to have trees. So that's why that piece is a lot. And then the other ones are broken down there: stormwater, electricity, air quality, property value, reduced natural gas, CO2. I mean, stormwater alone pays for the value of trees, because you have one washed out bridge or one washed out culvert. The amount of money is tremendous. And even in the city of New York, I had a chance in the last year to take a citizen tree pruner course, which was sort of in Manitoba, we had a thing called the Elm Guard, which was kind of a neighborhood watch for trees. This sort of takes that to the next level and allows people to go out under very strict criteria and do small tree pruning. And I always admired that. In fact, when I was in Edmonton, we were working on a citizen forestry type concept, and Portland had a really good one, and New York had one. And through the benefits one of the benefits of COVID was I was able to do it online, and then you have to go and do a qualification day like a day of service for the city of New York, and it was tremendous. And one of the things I found there was that these tiny little plots that they put them in, they're like 4 feet by 8 feet or something. The tree beds really retain a lot of moisture and reduce the amount of stormwater runoff. So any amount of runoff that's reduced is a tremendous value. So let's zoom in on that. It's a little bit sketchy, but you see these values in front of you. And these are a 3-inch tree I picked because it's at the time of planting. So that's right out of the truck, so to speak. You get it in the ground, that's for one tree. And from there, it gradually goes up over time as the tree grows. There's also a formula that's a little more complicated to see, at what point does it start to cost a lot for maintenance and these things, but it's sort of calculated into it. And that's 50 years probably in the future. So located in front of a single family home, that ash tree will give you $59. Again, I don't know if that translates to more in Canadian dollars because this was from the American site, but it gives you a sort of a rule of thumb. And again, this is from the Center for Urban Forest Research. And again, I broke these down segment by segment. So 162 gallons of stormwater runoff is a fair amount. Now, if you have thousands of these trees, it really does add up. 14 kilowatt hours of electricity and 2 therms of oil or natural gas. And this is done by shading, all of the kind of things that you expect trees to do. And air quality, particulate matter, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, all of these things are absorbed by trees. And 62 pounds of atmospheric carbon. So what does it all add up to? Well, I was reading an article sometime in the last year, I think it was in the winter time, that they were quite concerned of the 2,000 green ash trees in Morden, Manitoba. Well, they're probably more than 3-inch trees because they've been planting for a long time there. But if they were 3-inch trees, that's $126,000 of benefits a year. So now if we extrapolate that or switch species, it's kind of similar. Box elder, Manitoba maple, it's a little bit more per year, but you kind of get the point. And when it goes up to an 8-inch tree, which granted in Manitoba is probably 10 years down the road, it's $154 per year. And a 12-inch one is $203. And when it gets to be 17 inches, which isn't, I apologize for using the imperial measures, but it is where I am, $240 in annual benefits. And that's a kind of a typical mature Manitoba maple, even small at this point. There's a lot larger ones. Now, the key to all this thing is to really to view them as assets and to have a management plan. This is an older management plan from Edmonton. I think it's their most current one. They've done some other updated things, and this is from 2009, but it involved an inventory, a LiDAR, which is a type of radar thing where they took canopy cover information and stuff like that. So they're really looking at these trees as valuable assets and managing them as part of an overall program. Because too many times you would always hear like, oh, they're just a liability, we have to cut them down and they fall down in storms, and that's part of the deal, but the trees are also growing and creating these benefits. So when you scale it up to this is pollutants alone, on a scale of a city like Edmonton, it's quite tremendous, $3 million worth of reduced pollutants per year. And again, these are 2009 dollars. So And the key to it all in most of these things is to have a decent inventory. And there are people with the department in Edmonton that's their whole thing. It's not just bringing them in, it's also maintaining the inventory. And I think they get to most neighborhoods in, I think it's every 7 years to update this, but that's their species mix. I know Brandon or somewhere else would be much different than this, but this was the 2012 latest update. And then this is a part of their another thing that they've done called the asset management portion of it. And it splits it down in an interesting way that they maintain trees, which are the ones that they prune on a rotating schedule. They replace them and keep them up in the inventory. And that's what, $1.5 billion in 2020 values. And then there's the naturalized areas, which are parks, riverbank, ravines, these sorts of areas, another 74 million naturally wooded areas. So, you have $2.6 billion worth of replacement cost. But that's only one way of viewing them, because that doesn't calculate in all of those asset values that we were talking about, the contributions that they make. But in some ways, it's too many numbers to think about at one time. This is a picture of a typical Winnipeg scene. I think it's that would be East Kildonan. But you can see someone's planted a few trees. They still have, it looks like a Manitoba maple, blue spruce, Schubert chokecherry somehow manages to not have black knot, and a crabapple. The crabapple was part of a program where Winnipeg was subsidizing fruit tree production, which is a very good thing. And you don't want to stay completely fixated on the numbers because that's an important part, but also you have to think of how can we quantify the benefits of feeling good. And I was recently involved in a seminar where they were announcing and explaining to us the concept of 330-300. And as a kind of show of hands, has anybody heard of that here? No? Okay. Well, you're about to. And this is the but trees make me feel good kind of thing. We all know that. I'm kind of preaching to the choir literally here, but this was an attempt to quantify tree benefits that relate to health, mental health, longevity, and these kind of things. And it's backed up by solid research into emergency department admissions, psychiatric problems, prescription drug use, all of these kind of things. And the whole concept is that when you look out your window, like that picture that I had posted there before, and I'll post again, you should be able to see 3 good-sized trees. Your community should have a 30% canopy cover, and you should be within 300 meters to a park or green space. This is kind of out of UBC from a researcher from Holland. So we're back to metric. I just kind of go with it as it flows. So, and it's an evidence-based guidelines because there was, it's very hard to quantify these softer contributions. And if you look up in the top, the references there, Cecil spoke at a tree seminar that I was at, and I really thought it was a good thing. But that's the idea that you can see 3 decent-sized trees, and that you have a certain canopy cover. I don't know the current canopy cover or state of Winnipeg's inventory. I know they had a pretty good elm inventory. I don't know about the rest of the trees, but I'm sure somebody does. This is the abstract. If you want to look it up online, that's the background of it. And it's, again, evidence-based. and it has these clear and simple rules so that we might be able to not only put in the dollar-cents contributions for the traditional stuff, but all of these other soft social type things. So just in closing, and I'm going to switch to asking or answering any questions. I think we should all be planting trees because they make us feel good, but have that backup to know the dollars and cents and all of these quantifiable benefits. So appreciate you all putting up with me here, and I tried to keep it a little bit light and a little bit humorous because I think that curiosity drives things forward, and humor kind of lubricates it. So any questions at this point?
Well, thanks, Brad.
Can't get out of his.
We weren't just putting up with you. At least at our end, we were really enjoying what you were doing. That was really good information. Yeah. Could we just switch into the mode where we can see all the people on the call, so we can see who might have their hand up? Out of screen sharing mode.
Yeah, I don't think I can do that, can I? Oh, out of screen sharing?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, stop share. There we go.
Okay, there you go. Great. Okay, yeah. So I believe, was it Dennis that had a question there? Somebody put up a question in the, in the chat. Dennis says, thanks, Brad. Do you know if there is a subsidy program for Brandon?
I don't know that. But those subsidy programs like the one in Winnipeg was, they work very well.
A subsidy program for tree planting, or?
I would assume that's what he's asking, since
Yeah.
that's what Brad was talking about.
Did you just want to unmute Dennis? And
yeah, that's exactly what I meant, just to find out if there was a subsidy plan similar to Winnipeg.
No.
That I don't know, but Kyla might know.
No, there isn't at this time. I can't speak for the city of Brandon. I do work with them quite closely, but no, there isn't for the city of Brandon. I think you're like, because the city of Winnipeg has the relief program, but no, there's no program like that in Brandon.
We often talk about our admiration for Selkirk, because they've done a lot of work around environmental issues, and I know they greatly enhanced their tree canopy last year, I think. So we should follow their lead.
Selkirk's been really good. We have quite a few communities in Manitoba that have been taking steps towards having urban forest management plans, developing inventories, which is really, really important. You really can't have a plan unless you have an inventory. Brandon's partway complete one. They were working on one, and then COVID happened, and I think unfortunately they haven't picked that back up. But we have had other communities in the province. So we actually made a database on ArcGIS Online that can be made available to our communities to use for free. They do have to provide the staff to do the work, but we will train them and provide support. And so some communities have certainly taken us up on that. Selkirk being one of them, and several other smaller communities through their watershed districts have done that work. And so we have been promoting that, and we hope to facilitate developing inventories in urban areas in the province through some funding that we're receiving, so that we can increase the amount of communities that do have an inventory, because that really is the starting place for an urban forest management plan. Exactly. Or a community management plan.
Yeah, if you're going to manage these types of assets, like Kyla said, you have to have an inventory. That's the key to it, and having it in a ArcView type of geographic system is the way that it's done. It doesn't take very long to do. The company I work with has an entire, I don't know if there's a dozen people in that section now that just strictly does community inventories. And I think they've done a few of them even into Canada, but there's granting available from the state here as well as the federal government to do these kind of things. But people have to realize that the tremendous contributions these trees make, so that they can say, oh yeah, well, of course, I've got millions of dollars worth of assets and I don't even know what's out there, you know. So once they do that, then they can start to deal with it. And in some respects, things like the Dutch elm disease project or Dutch elm disease, there were inventories made, but they weren't necessarily at that time geospatial ones. They were just drive around in a van and count them up. But that's a start, you know, and all of that stuff can be added up. And nowadays, you can do these things with a cell phone with reasonable accuracy. We couldn't even imagine back then. So it was tremendous. If any of you have a chance or you're looking around, check out the Trees New York website. They had a really good program. And they started the round table where everybody introduced themselves. And I said, well, I just want to see how you get community involvement in these forestry things. And so they called me out as being a forestry professional right away. And I said, yeah, I am, but I'm thrilled to be part of it. And it's a tremendous program. They've trained thousands of people to get their citizen tree pruner license, but it is reasonably restrictive. You can't go out and do whatever you want. There's a certain caliber of trees, but what it does is it takes a burden off of the city crews to prune 3-inch trees that are 4 years old and have a dead branch on it. So they'll go into a neighborhood and do that, and you have to dispose of all the wood yourself. You can't hide it in a restaurant garbage or something like that. You can't leave the ground. What else? You can't prune from the street. So they read you the Riot Act, and then you get a little card that says you're an official citizen pruner of New York City. So it's programs like that really leverage a lot of community support, but it also is helpful when these people are trying to get things done, like an inventory or that sort of thing. I know, speaking back in the dark ages when we had the Elm Guard program, those people were great. They'd tell you exactly where the trees that had Dutch elm disease, and the communities that were really involved in it continued. Typically, there were sort of horticulturalists or gardeners or people that were interested in these sorts of things. And it was really a pioneering program in that sort of citizen forestry. And it can happen, because without trees don't plant themselves and they don't take care of themselves. So without that kind of people being advocates, you're not really going to move it forward when you're competing against roads, bridges, and sewer pumps, which are all good, but it's not a green asset.
Yeah.
Hey, Brad.
Hi.
I just thought I'd make my cameo appearance.
Oh.
Glad you did.
I'm actually out boiling sap today, so I had a 5-minute break, and I thought I would do what I was intending to do originally.
Oh, good. Well, I did mention you in regards to the Greening of Park project that we stumbled through and somehow managed to pull off and learn a lot from. So
I know, that was a wonderful time.
yeah.
Yeah. Thanks so much for doing this for the Brandon community, Brad.
No, I appreciate it. And it's great when I do get back there. I haven't been back much because of COVID, but when I do go back, it's good to see the elms are still standing and trees are still being planted, and people care. It makes a big difference.
Yeah. Well, I got to go back to my snowstorm. I just thought I'd say hello. It's been a while, friend.
Yeah.
Good luck
See
with
you, Dave.
Good luck with the syrup, Dave.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Brad,
Yeah,
I've just got a question for Brad. Do you have access to Cecil's article, like as a PDF?
I could send it through to Madeline if you want.
That would be great, because, this just came up as a topic of conversation at our Community Wellness Collaborative Planning Day last week, access to green space. And so that 300 information, I think, would be helpful for them as they kind of advocate for a variety of services and a variety of mental health benefits in Brandon.
Mhm. And I think it's good in a way too, because, think locally or think globally, act locally. This is definitely a global program. I don't know if there's funding, but there's certainly materials and quantifiable way to say, hey, we need to keep these parks, we need to keep these green spaces because, I did write an article years ago about leaving space for the green and it relates directly to Brandon, because you see some of these, whole neighborhoods that are made out of sixplexes or fourplexes, and they don't really have any inherent green space, which, is not going to pay off well in the future based on, even what we're talking about here. So it's important to advocate for these green spaces and have a quantifiable way of doing it, which I think is going to be very important with the 330, 300.
Yeah, one of the challenges that we have in Brandon, particularly in the downtown area, is that we have out-of-province landlords for some of these old properties that are no longer have manufacturing or housing, and so these buildings sit vacant, and they take that as it's valuable to them to take as a loss on their taxes. So they're sitting in British Columbia, but we've got buildings here that are taking up space that are in disrepair and probably not, the cost it would be too high to renovate those properties. So that's one of the things that we have to kind of take on as a city, as a community.
It's kind of a chicken egg cart horse kind of thing. Like you get these bleak parking lot neighborhoods nobody wants to live in, but at the same time, you have to kind of garner some initiative to green them in an appropriate way that they're more attractive and people would want to live there.
I think it is difficult too for, people who aren't here or even just, rental properties, because trees do require maintenance and care. And so if someone isn't there to do that, then, and sometimes people get nervous about it. They're nervous that, oh, well, but what if the tree falls down? And so maybe some public education there can help with that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I did just want to note for everyone here, we do have in Manitoba, the Manitoba Urban Forest Council. It's relatively new, but if you just Google it, you can join for free. And we do put on workshops and webinars. We had a workshop in Brandon in the fall. We had some speakers there for that. And just a plug to the Canadian Urban Forest Conference next year will be in Winnipeg. And so, speaking of Cecil and some, like the last Canadian Urban Forest Conference was in Charlottetown, and Cecil wasn't there, but there were researchers from UBC from their urban forestry program speak there. So there will be quite an opportunity, I think, for anybody who's really interested in urban forestry and promoting urban forestry to learn a lot from that conference coming up.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's excellent. I'd heard that was coming up, so.
Yeah, really. Brad was our tree expert, and Dutch elm disease, the Dutch elm disease program is kind of the birthplace of urban forestry, really, but certainly in Manitoba. And I work for Brad. He taught me much of what I know, especially about tree ID and forest pests and diseases in urban areas. Sim is on this call too. We always talked about that. She envied my one-on-one tutoring that I got from Brad all those years ago that were very, very beneficial for sure, and definitely taught me a great appreciation of urban trees and urban forests.
But the urban forest has to go hand in hand with the people that benefit from it. And that's the key, is to get community involvement, and things like the Elm Guard, things like the communities that had the Dutch elm disease program was a tremendous start, or we wouldn't have that. And in doing some research when I was at the city of Edmonton, a lot of the stuff is published online now. There were initial cost benefit analysis from Richard Westwood days which we were involved with, that showed the benefit of keeping these trees. And at that time, it was more along the replacement value as opposed to the benefits for that the trees gave themselves, like I was talking of today. But I did some analysis of his figures based on what we were finding in Edmonton, and it was very cost effective, and cost effective even to the point of having a municipal forestry and provincial departments taking care of this versus contracting everything out, which can be beneficial too. But they had gone through that whole thing because at that time there was a real initiative to just let them all go and we'll grow some other trees. You really can't do that. It's not an effective plan. You have to manage these assets. And now there are some numbers to back it up. So I think if people were aware of that, they'd be less inclined to pencil out the green assets as when they're developing neighborhoods and things like this, and the ones that we already have need to be maintained. It's critical. And if you do, I know our analysis back in the day was the natural attrition rate of elm trees without Dutch elm disease was close to 1.2% or something. And we managed with Dutch elm disease to have a 0.8% loss rate in Western Manitoba, where we had a unique position because there were isolated communities, mostly beyond where elms were in native stands. The exception of, Brandon or Sewers, where you have a kind of a river running through it.
Winnipeg.
Yeah. And Winnipeg elms are very, it's a native tree there, not so much in Verdon. But those isolated communities had very low rates as long as you kept up on the sanitation and maintenance of them and these kind of things. So
I
it
love
works.
it's Wayne Clayton here. I love the approach of putting a dollar figure on this, because that's what will drive city councils to make some right changes. Sort of as a end of life with the trees, we had a biomass presentation in Brandon here to some municipal or some city workers and some select municipalities from outside the city. And when we talked about using dead trees as a biomass source, got attention of some of these municipalities, because they have to dispose of these someplace.
Mhm.
So instead of just burning them in a dump or burying them, we're still burying them in a dump. If you can turn them into a biomass unit to heat something, it just makes all the difference in the world. Now you've got something that's a negative value, and you're going to at least decrease the negative value and maybe turn it into a positive value.
Mhm.
So it's can be one of the pieces that make some of this work for cities and municipalities.
Yeah, and I think that's all part of the management plan. That is kind of the lowest value product, but it is one of them, and you need to factor in disposal costs and recouping that kind of thing. And it also doesn't necessarily mean cutting all the trees down, because there is regular pruning and regular maintenance, and that is biomass, and you can stream that into some sort of a recycling, heat recovery, these kind of things, definitely, as opposed to just chipping it, dumping it, or as you said, burning it, which is what we always did a long time ago.
I think in that presentation, the biomass presentation, the presenter named a city that was heating all its municipal buildings just with the trimmings from the trees within the city. So it became for them quite a value added.
Mhm.
Yeah. Question I had, Brad, is in the urban setting here, we have lots of buried cables and sewer and water pipes and gas lines. How much of a challenge is it to to kind of work with that, human infrastructure in the soil and kind of make a peaceful coexistence with the tree roots that will be using that same soil.
Yeah, I know that's historically a problem, especially in Brandon with all the sewer pipes and these sorts of things. I think we're getting a better handle on that in some ways now that when this stuff is put into an inventory, there's also inventories of sewer pipes, electrical things and stuff like that. So you can identify places that are suitable for planting as opposed to just spacing them a certain distance apart without regard for the underground infrastructure. In a typical inventory, going back to Edmonton, and even as part of our citizen pruner course here in New York, they qualify sites for planting and try and avoid that as much as possible. So it's part of the management process, definitely.
Yes, with old infrastructure, like my property, the water pipes coming into sewer pipes coming into my property, I have a rotor-rooter pretty much at least once a year, if not twice a year. But I don't want them to see them cut the tree down, so I pay for it.
Yeah, and if it's a large, the benefits increase exponentially with the size of the tree. So if you're spending $200 to roto-root once in the fall of the year or something, it doesn't compare to the $1,000 worth of benefits you get every year from the tree. Reducing your gas prices, reducing your electricity use, not to mention the mental health benefits.
The question is whether it's the evergreen tree on my property or whether it's the tree that's on the city property.
Yeah, that now with DNA analysis, you might be able to figure it out, but that might cost you more than the rooting, that's for sure.
And either way, the benefits are still the same.
Yeah.
So do we have other questions for Brad? Yeah, just thinking of Dennis's earlier question about if there's a subsidy program for Brandon. And although there is no subsidy program, I seem to remember looking at some recent Brandon City Council meetings where trees were discussed, and it sounded like in light of the 2 million tree planting goal that's been set by the federal government, that at least seemed to be on the city's radar, because I think the mayor mentioned that in one of the meetings we were at or looked at afterwards, right? So it may be a timely topic for those of us who are want to be advocates of getting a better tree canopy in the city, that it does seem to be on the minds of some of the councils right now.
And it might coexist quite nicely with the rise in mental health issues that we're experiencing post-COVID. So there may be a way that we as Brandonites can encourage more trees and find funding for that.
True, and if there's anything that I can contribute, I have saved all of my materials from the New York City Citizen Pruner thing, which has a pretty good outline, and some other stuff I worked with in Edmonton and those kind of groups where if you had a citizen tree pruner or citizen tree something or other, there are examples that you can kind of co-op on and make your own version of or better, some things that worked and not. It was a good course. It took to qualify, you had to take 4 2-hour, they were online sessions, but it involved tree ID and the history. I love the history of the urban forestry of New York, just because, it's been around so long. And now when I walk down the street, you can see, oh, this tree planter was from this era. And because over time they planted different trees and there's been different philosophies and these kind of things. And, you know, in hundreds of years, not all those trees are around, but at least some of the park spaces are, and you can see where, oh, at that time they were planting this, then they switched to this, now this is gone. You know, so I like that kind of aspect of it, and I managed to keep the thumb drive, so I kept the materials, which was my reason for, and it wasn't free. You'd think they would offer these things free, but I think in a way, it sort of screens out the people that are really interested and the people that aren't. And I paid the fee and was more than pleased with all the information that came from it. It was a good project, and I got to meet some very interesting characters, and we all got together for the 4-hour in neighborhood pruning session where they showed you all the things, and then you had to do a test, and then you qualified. I told them I was really disappointed because I didn't get a number. I wanted to be, 007 tree pruning license. They said you can put whatever number you want on it. You're in the database, so. And they give you a little wallet-sized card and instructions how to deal with people if they come up and go, "What are you doing?"
Yeah. Well, that sounds great. Thanks for the offer of those resources.
But I don't see why that wouldn't work in any city. You're not taking work away from union labor or something like that, because mostly you're dealing with small caliper trees that are in their first year of life, but that can be a big leg up on these things before you start to have bigger problems later, Right. And it shows, you've got all these, I don't know the exact numbers, it's in the thousands of people that are out there informed, advocating for these things,
Just one little thing before we go. I was interested to hear about the incentive for planting apple trees in Winnipeg. Would there be an approach from food security sort of lean? I know we're talking about long-term effect on food security, but if we were be able to plant some kind of fruit trees in some of the community garden areas, would that possibly make a difference down the road? I mean, rhetorical question, but I mean, it's just something to think about.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's an excellent idea. And I don't know the ins and outs of the Winnipeg program, but it was fairly easy for the person who did it. I mean, he is a forestry guy, but at least he was able to just go there and get a tree and put it in the ground and qualify. So I think it was a good program. I don't see why you couldn't have something like that in Brandon or in any community.
Great. Any other questions or comments to share? Right. Well, if not, the end of our lunch hour time is coming up in a few minutes here, and speaking personally, I'd say that was a lunch hour well spent. Really, lots of great information, Brad, and you offer some great resources, and also hearing from you, Kyle, about things that are available in Manitoba as well, other resources. So this has been a rich opportunity to educate ourselves about what's possible and why it's a good idea to do it. So thanks to everyone who has contributed to this conversation.
And appreciate the opportunity to blather on about trees, which I quite frequently do, and it's nice to have a receptive audience. I will send some links to the 330-300 and City Trees New York, and some other things like the City of Edmonton's management plan, and any other information that you feel later that you need to get from me, just send it through Madeline and I will forward it to you. So
So let's join in giving our, our Zoom applause
Yeah.
to Brad for
Thank you.
Sure.
us today.
Well, and we should say that this Zoom session was recorded and it will be posted on the Knox Connection YouTube page. And our recent experience is that we sometimes double or triple the number of folks that have participated in the initial event. So watch for that. Maybe I'll have the green team send out a link once we have that posted, and folks can share it. So I don't know if you're already currently a YouTube celebrity, Brad, but it's forthcoming.
Prepare yourself for the awesome wave of notoriety.
I do have a social media presence and it's all pretty good, although my series on truck food went absolutely nowhere, although it was very good. So enjoy.
Okay, thanks very
Appreciate
much
it.
again. Thanks
Thank
all
you.
for participating today.
Thanks very much.